please feel free to move around in your seat so you can get a better view if you need to. So right now we're in the center of a 3-part series that's on the Lotus Sutra. And for those of you who weren't here last week, I said a few words about the Lotus Sutra. It's old. It's about 2,000 years old and was compiled over 300 or 400 years, and that was 300 or 400 years after the Buddha's death. And it's central and a beloved teaching within the broader school of this particular lineage of Buddhism. And its style of discourse is not analytical and it's not logical, although it is logical in one way, but it relies more on parables and stories. And like the feathers of the flamboyant feathers of a peacock, we can say it offers a fantastic display of awakening for us to look to and learn from in a kind of direct invitation. And I think it's worth remembering the natural joy and ease with which children take to stories. Right? Before, children are wanting a map of, wait, how does this relate to that, to relate to this? They're like, I want to be a ninja. Right? Santa Claus, how does he get down the chimney? Oh, he's got the magic, tapper that makes the chimney get big, right? There are ways the world of a child's mind works that allows a reality to appear. And so I think the Lotus Sutra is working with this kind of a natural faculty that's endemic to primary human consciousness. Well, that's where I put my money. And I'm fond of saying that a 4th century Roman man, in the time when Christianity was moving into Rome and spreading a new ideology, way of living, a new religion, he was defending the olden ways when he said, the gods and myths never were, but always are. Never were, but always are. So this is mythical thinking. These are eyes that are looking to see in a different way beyond our usual searching for historicity, the history of something, the external validity, the reality of something, we'd say, the facts. And rather, it's pointing us back to the fundamental. Perhaps we could say the actual, the present lively energies that animate our lives. So last week, we worked with just a short section that was towards the beginning of the Lotus Sutra. I'll go over that briefly here. The Buddha told the entirety of the great, vast cosmic assembly, he said, the awakening that I've attained is supreme, delicate, intricate, and so subtle, so incredibly difficult to realize. You should know that. And you've got it in the bag. Don't worry about it. The Dharma I've offered you will take you directly there. And so there's this funny line, the members of the assembly give each other perplexed looks. You can sort of imagine that. They're like, oh. So, and there's a funny line too where it says, someone asks the Buddha, will you please explain this? And they say something along the lines of, we get it, but the people after us, they totally won't get it. They're not going to get it. So please, explain it clearly for us. And so they ask. They say, what is this all about? Would you please explain it? We put our palms together and wait expectantly, begging you to make wonderful sounds. We all want to hear about this perfect way. And the Buddha, rather than saying, all right, let me tell you how it is, let me break it down, he says, stop. There's no need to say any more. If I explain this further, everyone will just be more confused. The world's heavenly beings as well as human beings will be startled and perplexed. So the assembly, of course, they didn't all gather for nothing. They want to get to the root of it. So they ask again, and the Buddha gives a similar response. And he says, on hearing it, those who are utterly arrogant will neither receive nor take care of it, nor believe this. And so they ask again. They ask that 3rd time. And the Buddha says, since you've earnestly repeated your request 3 times, how could I refuse you? He said, now, I'll explain it for you clearly. And then a curious shift happens. When he had said this, immediately some 5,000 monks and nuns, laymen and laywomen, got up and bowing to the Buddha, left the meeting. Because why? Because they had already imagined themselves to have attained and borne witness to what they had not actually attained. They were incapable of receiving the Dharma. The Buddha kept silent and did not stop them. 5,000 arrogant monks and nuns, laymen and laywomen, stand up and leave the assembly. I always find it curious that none of the pythons and griffins leave, right? It's only the human beings who cop to it. And maybe that's our great strength, is we know when to bow out. And later in the sutra, the Buddha says, when beings wholeheartedly wish to behold the Buddha, not begrudging their own bodily lives, then I and the assembled Sangha appear together on sacred Vulture Peak. This Vulture Peak, or sometimes called Eagle Peak, is a historical place in northern India where the Buddha delivered many important sermons to his disciples. So drawing from these stories and images, I pointed to two significant things. So one, in this non-begrudgment of our bodily life. I really love that. How often are we just begrudging things? As I put my hands together in Zazen Mudra. But instead, we must learn to somehow patiently be present with our suffering. In fact, maybe we also have to not begrudge our begrudging, right? A special trick in there. Great patience to be with our inability. I read a short writing from a man named James Hillman, and he said, our chronic inability, something through time, that we seem to just be endlessly unable to settle into ease. We can't begrudge that, and it's so easy to turn away from it. Through distraction, through planning, through techniques, right? Endless escapes. And the second thing I pointed out is longing or desire to know what we do not already know. The term I was using most often was yearning. And this itself is what dispels arrogance, right? Our endless planning, our scheming. I'm on this new diet, I'm going to feel so much better, which is true, but it's not going to bring ease and joy to your life necessarily. So we need our plans, we need our scheming, but if we recognize that if we're putting all our eggs in those baskets to make our life a comfortable shape, the very foundational teachings of Buddhism remind us nothing stays put, right? This is not a safe place to pour all of our energy and our liveliness. Something else is required, and this yearning is central to that. Now, endlessly caught in narrow solutions, trying to carry out our plans is sharpening techniques. Churning forward of the anxiety. Ka-chunk, 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 ka-chunk. A little bit this way, a little bit left, a little bit right. Da, da, da. So, if these become enacted in our being, this receiving our non-begrudgment of our bodily life, accepting and staying with our suffering, and also at the same time, not merely just sitting with it and churning in the laundry machine of it, but also yearning to go beyond and not relying on what we already know. And something can appear, something simple and miraculous. And as this teaching of skillful means opens up for us. That's what the Buddha teaches about, and what the rest of the Lotus Sutra and all sorts of parables and stories within stories are talking about this skillful means. And this skillful means, it says that because the natures, desires, and embodiments of living beings are different, so too the gateways of awakening are equally unique and vast. There's endless paths up the mountain. And in fact, the path of the mountain that you will need to encounter comes directly from your embodiment. Where are you stuck? What is your suffering? That all needs to come to the plate when we start to talk about practice, when we start to talk about waking up. We don't merely get to get a formula outside that will sort of wash away our challenges, but rather we're invited into techniques and practices that bring us front and center with our own difficulties. So we can think about the somewhat hilarious trickery that might happen in Zen centers, where someone's like, "Hi, I'm here to sit quietly and do the peaceful thing." You say, "Great, we could offer you that. Let's sit together quietly." And then we just say, "Well, here it is. Here's the muck of your life, and we'll stay with it we're actually not going to tell you how long. I'll just let you know when we're done," right? You're plunged directly into your challenge. And this is a great jewel and secret and mystery that Buddhist teaching has to offer us. That is the exact gate, right? Exactly where we're trying to get away from is where the jewel is present. The mythologist of the mid-19th century, Joseph Campbell, he said that when you follow your bliss, the universe opens doors for you where you thought there were only walls. So I think that's very kind of him to use the term bliss, and maybe it felt like that for him. But for me, the word yearning is more apt there and lively in my experience. To follow my yearning where I felt only brick walls that meant I have to go this way or that way, out and into the world to conquer, to manage this or that. If I stay with that, the walls have trapdoors, windows appear. What I thought was stone actually allows a certain kind of light. So I want to share a parable, of course, as one of the main stories used to talk about skillful means. This will be about 3 or 4 minutes to invite you to settle into receiving. And it's quite abridged from how the story appears in the Lotus Sutra for time's sake. But be aware there are certain key words and terms that have stayed just as they are. So I encourage you to feel for some nuggets of sharp images that grab you, and to invite this story, not just hearing it on the outside, but allow it to center in the chamber of your being. This is commonly referred to, I think, as the parable of the lost son. Suppose a young man left his father, ran away, and lived in some other land for a long time, some 10, 15, 20, or even 50 years. He became poor and destitute the older he became. He wandered around in every direction, looking for food and clothing. Meanwhile, his father had searched for him unsuccessfully and now lived in another city. His household had become incredibly wealthy, with his goods and treasures overflowing the storehouse. He had received a new name and title. He had many holdings in other lands and employed many servants, clerks, and merchants. He always yearned to see his son again. The son happened to encounter his father by chance, but did not recognize him. He happened to gaze upon his father while he sat on a throne, surrounded by workers and attendants. He was adorned with jewels, at ease and bright in countenance. He appeared majestic and distinguished. The poor son was looking for employment and suddenly struck with fear. He thought, "Surely this man is a king or something like it. I'll never be offered work here. I'll never be given a place in this hall. If anything, they will seize me and force me to labor as a slave." So he quickly departed. The king, or his father, had seen his son and recognized him immediately. He sent his attendants to run after him and bring him back, hoping to welcome him back. But when they reached him, the son called out in fear and fainted, believing his fears were coming true. They brought him back to the palace, but the father realized the son was not able to accept the gravity of his noble position, because he clung to his lowly and fearful position. So he instructed his workers to sprinkle water on the son's face and tell him that he is free to go. And so the son woke, rejoiced, and departed. The father sent his workmen to offer the man a job. The position would receive double the ordinary wages of the time, though the work would indeed be shoveling dung. He would have good lodging and not want for basic necessities, The son accepted this position, and the father began to cultivate a relationship with his son by disguising himself as a foreman, dressing in rough appearance, and adopting a gruff manner, encouraging the workers and his son to get to work, don't be so lazy. Though he dearly adored his son, through such skillful means he could get near to him. After a short while of this arrangement, he told his son, "Please stay here and continue this work. We'll increase your wages and the quality of your lodgings. No need to search for another position. This place can be like home to you." The son and father grew in confidence with each other, and for around 20 years continued removing dung in this way. Eventually, the son was offered a position in the home. Father said, "You are trustworthy and upright, like a son to me. Please tend to my affairs, cultivate a detailed understanding of the comings and goings of my accounts." The son accepted these instructions and took respectful care of his father's affairs, still unaware of their deep relation. Now, the father knew he was soon to pass away. So he called a meeting with the king, the ministers, nobles, and ordinary citizens of the land, and announced, "This man is my true-born son. Though we were lost from each other, we have been reunited. Now, all of my wealth belongs entirely to him, and all of my earlier disbursements and receipts are known intimately by him." The son rejoiced and thought, "Without any intention or effort on my part, these treasures have now come to me by themselves." So we can feel those skillful means, ripe throughout the entire parable there. The father always yearning to see his son. And the son, though of noble blood, could not realize his inheritance. This setting us up for a relationship with the teaching of Buddha nature, that we, each of us, in the very instability and impermanence of the world, also have a precious inheritance right there in the center. And so we can see a warm metaphor there, and maybe we can imagine a world where, in fact, there is a Buddha longing for us. And at every gate of our yearning or being open to a new path, a new way up the mountain, we're pointed carefully and subtly, and sometimes we don't even recognize it's the Buddha offering it. It could be a gruff, "Don't be lazy, get to work." And we could take a step. We could take a step. And so this points us to skillful means, thinking about how we have tremendous opportunity to affect each other. That in fact, we can also be welcoming people into yearning and ease and joy, more stability, more brightness and beauty in their life. And we have a tremendous responsibility in that. And further, we can rub shoulders with wise people who in fact can do things which wake us up from our infatuation with our repetitive suffering and our narrow views. So I'd say if you have an opportunity to rub shoulders with people like this and to query them about their minds and their hearts, please do so. This is a tremendous opportunity. But also, if we put on our mythical eyes, if we envision the father and son as not internal or external, or take our identity up with any particular character of the story, what's it like when the father and son are contained within a singular wholeness that is my life? So doesn't a baby's cry, the feeling that was Remy we got to enjoy this morning, a baby's cry or the kneading of our cat on our chest, even if it's very cute but also very annoying sometimes, doesn't that also call us in to our intimacy, to the constant exchange, the coming and going that's at the center of the house? Even the scary things, a car accident, and death of a loved one. They wake us and shake us into the actuality of our interdependence with all beings. Or as Mary Oliver pointed to last week with her poem, the harsh and exciting honk of the goose. Honk, honk, announcing our place in the family of things. So skillful means can also point to the lively being of each moment, coursing through the world that we can attend to, which can invite us up the mountain, can open up our witnessing of the Buddha on sacred Vulture Peak. A shastra, or a teaching by an ancestor, which we read in the morning, called The Harmony of Difference and Sameness, puts it like this. Each of the myriad things has its merit, expressed according to function and place. Phenomena exist, box and lid fit, principle responds, arrow points meet. Hearing the words, understand the meaning. Don't set up standards of your own. If you don't understand the way right before you, how will you know the path as you walk? Progress is not a matter of far or near, but if you are confused, mountains and rivers block your way. If you don't understand the way right before you, a more literal translation of those characters is, if you don't understand the way as it touches your eye, as it touches your eye. The eye is so fragile. So is the human heart. The way is always pressed up against it. Mountains and rivers block your way. That mountains and rivers right there is kind of a code word for things, phenomena, experiences, thoughts, concrete objects. Mountains and rivers block your way. Hearing the words, understand the meaning, don't set up standards of your own. If you don't understand the way as it touches your eye, how will you know the path as you walk? Progress is not a matter of far or near, but if you are confused, the things of your life seem like they are blocking you. It could be a way we read that. And so can you feel the threshold of path that's possible when we take in this understanding of skillful means? On one hand, out there, a subject-object-verb relationship that we engage in with each other all the time. And we learn about it through teachers and guides and friends, and we also have the opportunity to affect people. It's such a lively stepping on the path, that exchange with other human beings. And also, a root of that in the very actuality of our life, the concreteness of living. So we can see this skillful means as a lens, and it allows us to recognize, to recognize the function and place of each thing we encounter. And can you feel that? A root of great freedom lies right there. Always being invited into the family things, the family of things. So the crow outside says, it can be like this. It can be like this. Even the grumbling of your own heart and mind. Oh, it can be like this. It can be like this. Not trying to press our way past anything to find an ideal state, but allowing these things to be precious in themselves. There's a line from another shastra we read in the morning, which is called the Precious Mirror Samadhi. It says, with a great archer's skill, one can hit the mark at 100 yards. But arrows meeting head-on, how could it be a matter of skill? So on the one hand, we get to see in this story the father of the son has immense skill, immense cleverness in inviting his son into the reality of his inheritance. But the son's actually kind of regular. Do you get that feeling? Just kind of wandering destitute, it doesn't go so well, and he's like, well, I got a better gig. Great, I'll do that. And then the father, out of compassion, gives him double the wages. He's encouraged and skillfully led to stay in the muck. That's the job. And although when we first have the thought, maybe I could be present in the hall, Maybe I could be present in this well-ordered coming and going of things with such great treasures, present, such respect and care for things. Maybe I could be there. At the same time, we will all encounter fear because we know that has something to do with the muck. And a part of us is very unhappy about that situation. And yet, we're told by someone, maybe the muck can pay off. Maybe. Maybe they really will give me double the wages. Maybe this apartment is pretty good. Little view outside, near the river. And then, staying with the muck day after day, your wages even increase, you gain friendships. So in our practice of the path, and I think our dream envisioning of this temple is when you come to practice the way, that should come with community. That will come with community. We're enacting it here, right now. We're no longer alone in the muck, and it's a big difference. And so finally, gaining some faculty there in the muck, not begrudging it, and in fact maybe learning a few tricks, like maybe you don't shovel the dung in the hot afternoon sun, work in the morning and work in the evening, right? Talk with the gardener and say maybe we should serve a couple salads during the week. Right? It changes the quality of things. We start to learn some faculties about how to work with the dung. Right? I'm taking the metaphor a little far. But then we can be invited into the house. We're asked to pay attention to all the comings and goings, develop an intricate and detailed understanding of the accounts. For me, what comes to me there is thinking about this word samadhi, or concentration or absorption. It's often talked about as a meditative state of absorption or awareness. Just settled in the house, endless coming and goings, and being drawn in, interested, excited by all the comings and goings. And even when it doesn't have that beautiful quality, say when a loved one passes away, we also see that though they are externally gone in one sense, actually lively and present in the way that you see and know the world day by day, moment by moment. We don't get to rest in the simplistic idea that anything can ever truly be gone. And we don't exactly know the gate by which they entered our heart. A preciousness for all our encounters can be at the center in this coming and going. So even the title of this precious mirror samadhi, if we play with the order of those characters a bit, we can come up with a title like Concentration of Precious Self-Reflection. A concentration of precious self-reflecting. Or absorption in the mirror of great worth. That just maybe life can be like this. When we entertain that idea, how does this transform our idea of path? What are things? What are our experiences? Mountains and rivers. At the end of sesshin, or meditation intensive, here at this temple and other Soto Zen communities, a short gatha is read before we close the last period of zazen. And it goes like this. Great is the matter of birth and death. Day and night go quickly passing by. Each one of you, wake up, wake up. Don't waste this life. So for me, for many years, that came as a very welcome reminder of my own yearning. We talked about that last Sunday. What brought you here to turn away from your usual methods and techniques of trying to settle down your world and solve your problems, and turned you back towards the muck? And after about 11 periods of zazen a day sometimes, that's a very welcome reminder. And then one day, the meaning of those words shifted for me. We can hear it as, great is the significance of being a fleshy body. It's important. Pay attention. And if we finagle those words just a bit, we can hear the concreteness of birth and death. The matter that is birth and death is itself great. You feel the movement there? Great is the matter of birth and death. The concrete appearance of my life is itself beyond my ability to get it, to figure it out. It's always a lively gate into what we sometimes call the womb of the Buddhas, or the embryo of the Buddhas. And so this talk series is called The Countless Petals of the Lotus. Now, oftentimes, that image is seen as within the undifferentiated mud that's below a pond. There's a stem rising up, and there's a kind of transcendence and beauty that can result from staying with that non-differentiated perception, right? Some Zen words in there, but I think you get the feeling. I think the image I'm offering here is a little different. That moment by moment is a petal. There's a flower. There's a preciousness that's there. And that can lead us into a warm, dark womb where we can't find another. It's the ground that supports every flower appearing. Great is the matter of birth and death. So I mostly spoke about skillful means today from the perspective of a living being being invited into and asked to remember or reunite with their inheritance by blood taking up the center and ownership of the house. And next week we'll see what we can say about Buddhas doing the invitation of inviting living beings. We have time for some questions. Yeah, Autumn.
I'm still kind of hung up on the ending of the story or the parable where he says, I didn't do anything, like I had no part in this. Like, is that a lesson in humility, or is he kind of oblivious, or like, could you say more about that?
Yeah. It's fun. I really like you said oblivious. I think he is oblivious. And that's being, I think, contrasted there as a kind of great encouragement and the joy of just simply getting to be and experience human living. And so, I don't know if you remember the beginning movement I showed with the Buddha saying, this awakening is immensely intricate and challenging, and yet you've got it. And hopefully here I'm trying to point out that things in themselves wake us up. Where so commonly when we approach path and start to practice, we settle down into an idea that by my good effort, I will do the awakening. Like it's about me and my shovel. And that's really important. And in fact, the story says that he shoveled the dung for 20 years. So he showed up in one sense, but the cleverness or the fact that he couldn't become Buddha, but already had that present in his being, that it was his inheritance, to show that he had to show up in a very straightforward way, and then gate by gate opened without his knowing about it necessarily, that there's a kind of mysterious guiding grace that allowed him to progress as he did.
Can you say a little bit more about how you understand the son's fear and his sense of unworthiness?
Yeah. The word unworthiness never quite lands with me, but fear definitely lands with me. and the moment it's coming to me right now, the image is, say after a long day of work, I have a hankering to escape all of my anxiety through various forms of pleasure and entertainment and journeys or projects. I'll feel this kind of jump to say, great, the hard stuff's done. Now, how do I do what I get to want to do? And if I smell that early enough, I can recognize that there's some kind of fear that's driving me. And it doesn't mean that if I face that fear, it doesn't mean I won't end up having fun and enjoying things or doing some kind of project I need to do. But I can move through my life simply avoiding my anxieties landing in me. And so day after day, I feel like I encounter this fear of an unwillingness for some reason or another just to stay put with whatever's present. And instead, I want to turn that over to my own agency of control. And so that fear is a mysterious teacher. It really is the word fearlessness can be thrown around a lot. And that fearlessness, I very rarely tasted it. That pure image of being without fear. What I feel like I have had the blessing to taste is choosing to meet fear, which is, I think, how fearlessness really appears for us, is going straight towards it. Emma?
Kind of continuing off of what you're saying about fear, I'm thinking about, so in the story, he becomes so fearful that he faints, but then that sort of like continues to unravel his path towards receiving his bloodline and inheritance. And that feels like just like a graceful, as in like full of external grace, moment there where he doesn't choose to meet his fear. He doesn't make the choice to sit in it. There's some sort of external presence that leads him to a place of slower presencing of muck. Can you say more about that moment?
Mm-hmm. My experience of practicing here, I started searching around 11 years ago and found Buddhism. I felt like I was had no other choice but to do something. And my joy and hate of coming, I went to Great Vow for a month and practiced there before doing any other practice. I sat just a couple times at home by myself, and my fear and joy that the whole churning forward of that community and practice sort of pinned me to the suffering. Of course, I could have left. That would have been fine. And many people there in my cohort, I think 2 or 3 people left after the first day. It was quite just like, oh man, like dropping like flies kind of feeling. However, with bodies next to me, I could do the practice. Even if it felt like just tying my rope for every period of Zazen. And I tell this story that I just anchored with my breath for many periods. I just was like, like it was just like, I'm only breath. And that allowed me to stay present and just make it through. And finally someone was like, are you breathing intensely? And I was like, I don't know. And they're like, I looked, it's definitely you. And okay. And they were like, stop doing that. And I was like, okay, I'm sorry. So again, a gruff worker right there being like, pay attention. We don't do it that way. And I was like, okay. But the give and take of the other living beings is just feels absolutely vital to path as I've experienced it. And, in a way, I think it's so confusing and misleading when we read some teachings about mindfulness, for example, or about just develop a meditation practice on your own. It'll be helpful. I think that's true. And there's something so missing when we leave out being body to body, side to side with other people next to us. that it feels like where a kind of grace can enter for our own fear. And then we get the joy later on of, sitting next to someone else, and you can feel just the constant, pain in someone's heart, the pain in the body that we all experience now and again. And so in a way, you never ever leave it. But something does open and change there.
Genjo. I want to circle back around to that word unworthiness, because this is something I really appreciate about this parable. I think, whatever you think might be underlying that, it is the experience of a lot of people in the West with a lot of shame, self-loathing, basic feeling of inadequacy, of unworthiness to participate in the world. And there's not very many places in the literature that directly address that. And we talk a lot more about, arrogance, our basic ignorance and narrow view, which can include that, but it doesn't really directly address that, and this does so beautifully. I don't know what your thoughts on that.
It points me back to yearning. That's something, I imagine that moment where he's looking into the hall, and even beyond his conscious yearning, there's just a subtle thought, which we might equate to bodhicitta, or a subtle mind of awakening, that says, oh, maybe there's another way, and maybe I am worthy. And I'm really curious about where that sense of unworthiness, because I know it must be here, even if I might use it by different words. But I so subtly, naturally, just turn my mind towards small wheels of control that I can see all the sides of and know. And I decide to make my living there. I say, I'm going to just cultivate my own sense of agency. And in my experience, I have a positive relationship with the word shame. And that I've found beings or experiences that show me the narrowness of that small turning. And I'm open towards receiving it. And sometimes that clamps down in a negative way, but it also has the possibility to go the other way and sets our heart to yearning. Those are my thoughts.
Genjo, if I could say something here, I think that because I resonated also with the idea of unworthiness, and I think, and having faced this week being called on some of my muck and the discomforture of that, and having to go through that kind of thing, and then feeling like the shame or the sadness or the unworthiness of being in this life, or how horrible that I did that. To me, it feels like it goes back to ignorance. Like so much of the problems I've caused in the world maybe don't come so much from intention, like a conscious intention, but from an ignorance, greed, hate, delusion, ignorance, and all of that yearning, but maybe just taking it as, for me personally, like a step out of the basic greed, clinging and grasping, but back to the ignorance that causes that, or however they're so connected. But maybe if you just wanted to speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, it's such a wonderful point, Dojun, that in Buddhism, the atonement gatha that we chant here every Sunday, all my past and harmful karma, so all of the things that I've done through my body, speech, and mind that have been negative or harmful in the world, born from beginningless greed, hate, and delusion. That word beginningless is so important. that means it's not yours necessarily. I mean, actually, it's not yours fundamentally. You are the causes and conditions of infinite things appearing in the world. And in one sense, as our intention appears in the world and all of our energies move out of us, I like to think of the whole entire universe expanding in a certain shape to pull those energies out of me. So how could I find my own fault as being the only cause? And yet the flip side of that atonement gatha is I now fully avow. And that avow, I thought that word meant to disavow for a long time. But avow means something more like to lay bare or to expose, to make known, to see clearly. So there's the movement of at-one-ment present, that although there's this, I do treacherous, shitty things sometimes. And I'm unaware of it largely. But when it comes to me that our practice as bodhisattvas, beings of awakening, is to not cling to them and pin them to ourselves, but to lay them bare and to also recognize they're fundamentally not mine. And then we can have a different kind of movement that's possible.
Does that fundamentally not mine maybe suggest a lack of
self-responsibility
in some way, though? But potentially the danger of that?
Potentially.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But I think with the vowing there, that as we really try and make known, you will feel all of your self-grasping present right there, to really turn up the whole fullness of a mistake and be led through our ignorance into our intention. That even if we are ignorant of certain actions as we do them, there's always intention present. And this is the subtle teaching of karma, that actually the degree of karma that you generate as a being is related to the depth of that intention for a mistake. So for example, if you're walking along, singing a song and looking at the beautiful sky and you step on a bug, that's one kind of karmic movement that you've just unfolded by the stepping on that bug. Maybe you should have been paying more attention. But if you were like, I hate that bug, and you step on it and you smush your foot a couple times, that's a very different karmic flow that is going through your being, right? So this is the endless exploration of karma, and both beginningless, likely, I think if you're doing that to a bug, we often talk about childhood trauma. There are things that led you to be doing that action to that bug, right? I think you get the play, I think too.
Right.
This and all our teachings are offered free of charge. If you would like to make a donation, please visit our website at buddhaeye.org and click the donate button at the top of the page. Thanks. Sangha.